Hello guys, it's Revolution. In this video we are going to be discussing whether the gods of destruction are all the same power level or relative to one another. So guys, I'm already going to ask you what you think. Do you think all the gods of destructions are at relative levels of raw power? Let me know down in the comment section. Obviously I've got a lot to talk over in this video, and then I'll give my take on this particular topic. There are a lot of people who think the gods of destructions are at similar levels. There are some that think there are huge gaps in power amongst the gods of destructions. In terms of what Toriyama's overall vision for where the gods of destructions lie with their particular power, it's hard to gather that from the anime in particular. There are a few instances where we see Beerus and Champa have a bit of a squabble, but not anything really major. Obviously, in the manga of the Dragon Ball Super continuity, we get to see all the gods of destructions go at each other in a 12-man battle royale. So whilst we will look at both continuities and see what they both have to offer and what they both suggest, we're looking for an overall feeling of where these characters lie amongst each other and trying to get in the head of, say, Toriyama and Toyotaro, and maybe even Toei. But before we begin, I have come to the conclusion that YouTube does not promote my content, so if you're new to the channel by any chance, please do subscribe. Help me fight the system. I've had enough. Come on, hit the subscribe button. If you love Dragon Ball, you'll like my content anyway. What's the worst that can happen? Smash that like button, lend me your energy. So, onto the gods of destruction. Are they all the same power? Have you answered down in the comment section yet? Don't worry if not, we've got some things to talk about first. So as the anime is already finished and we've kind of got it all locked into one place with the anime, we'll just go over a few things that we know from the anime about the gods of destructions. It's not a lot. We know that Beerus is incredibly strong and that Goku and Vegeta are training to obviously get to the level of Beerus' power. Obviously with the anime, we have the movie continuations, and even though some people consider them continuations of themselves, they are intended to follow the anime. So like I said, with the objective of this video, we want to find a kind of an idea of how Toriyama might see these gods of destructions amongst each other, and obviously everything that happens concerning Beerus in these movies can relate back to the anime. Look, if it changes in the manga adaptation of Superhero, then so be it, but until then, we don't know. Ultimately, what we know is that Beerus is relative to Broly, Broly is relative to Gogeta Blue, Gogeta Blue is massively stronger than Goku Blue and Vegeta Blue, and in Superhero we find out that Ultra Instinct, which was pretty relative in raw power to Awaken Jiren, wasn't that much stronger than Goku and Vegeta to begin with in their blue forms. I'm talking about their Blue Kaioken and Blue Evolution forms. And I made a video the other day, was Jiren nerfed, dissected? We went through why it can absolutely make sense that Jiren, whilst he seemed overwhelmingly powerful in the portrayal of his dominance, seemed like it was way more than just a little bit stronger. Ultimately, it can work. I highly suggest you watch that video before you ramble down in the comment section of why the quotes from Superhero doesn't make sense. They were written by Toriyama. You just need to deal with it. Some good copium you can get from the local corner shop if you need to, but ultimately, we've got to move past that now. Basically, what we know is that Beerus therefore should be stronger than Belmod, because Belmod is weaker than Jiren in the anime. Obviously we have the old arm wrestle thing, once again covered in that video I just talked about, so we won't go over it here. Now obviously if you want to be very strict on what the anime continuity is, you can only really take into account what goes up to the Tournament of Power, the Broly movie and Superhero, and you could say, well, the Moro arc doesn't exist, the Granola arc doesn't exist, all those things that happen in those stories, even though Toriyama we know is heavily involved in those stories, those events didn't occur. Regardless, the anime only really gives us a few comparisons with Beerus, and that's mostly Belmod and Champa. All the other gods of destructions, whilst we do see a few fight in the Universal Survival arc in a 4-man God of Destruction match to test out the arena, we just don't really learn that much about them in terms of their power. The manga does it a lot better, but just to wrap up the anime, obviously with Champa we know that Beerus is implied to be a bit stronger because he's in better shape. We see them fight twice, I think it's in episode 28 and the Yamcha baseball episode, but these are just squabbles. They're not super serious fights where we get to see match defining moments or an eventual victor to really get an idea on who is the strongest. We just know that they are implied to be incredibly powerful again. But with Belmod, like I just said, we know Jiren is stronger than Belmod. If you think about episode 122, I believe it is, where Vegeta's using the final flash on Jiren, Vegeta's risen his power so much and amplified his power so much with that final flash that Belmod actually starts to get extremely nervous. Why would he be nervous if he knows how powerful Jiren is? We know Jiren tanks it. Still, that gives you an indication of where Belmod believes Jiren's power is. He knows Jiren's stronger than him, but yet he's worried about this certain power, which is a Super Saiyan Blue level power. If Beerus is relative to Broly in the Broly movie, Beerus is a lot stronger than Belmod. Now, the manga goes in a lot more detail, and a lot of people try to use this Zeno Battle Royale as a means to say, look, these gods of destructions are at similar levels of power, they all survive, they can tank each other's attacks, and therefore they're all at similar levels of power. But we've got to move past that type of scaling. In Dragon Ball, and especially in Dragon Ball Super, just landing a hit on an opponent doesn't mean you're the same level as them. We've got to start looking at match-defining moments that ultimately indicate one way or another, much more to a certainty degree, on who is stronger. Landing a punch could just mean the other person suppressing their power. We've learnt this time and time again. In terms of the ratio of the power between the two fighters, it might not be as much as we think it is, it might be even greater. Until the full story is unfolded, until the full battle is unfolded, we don't know what characters are fighting at the maximum power until when, and it usually happens at the end of the fight. For example, Jiren and Goku, we know they're at the maximum power at the end of that fight. We know that Broly gets to his maximum power when he starts to fight against Gogeta Blue. If you look at the Broly movie, there's a moment where Broly in Super Saiyan is chasing Super Saiyan Blue Goku, and Vegeta, just in base form, catches them up just like that. That's a speed feat, you could say, technically. I don't think the thought of it is that base Vegeta is at the level of Super Saiyan Blue Goku. In fact, he doesn't prove that when they actually get into the actual hand-to-hand combat with Broly. He loses just like Goku does. Like I said, we've just got to get past that, oh, he's landing a punch, that definitely means he's that level of power. There could be plenty of reasons why it isn't the case. So ultimately, in the Zeno exhibition match, we know that Beerus is questioned by Quitela, let's see who is the strongest. All of a sudden, you've got to think of the objective of Quitela. Obviously, this is being written by Toyotaro with Toriyama backing him. The objective of Quitela is to rile Beerus up. Therefore, in Quitela's mind, Beerus is one of the stronger gods of destructions. Obviously, all these gods of destructions turn on Beerus. It turns into, I would say it was an 11-1. When I first read it, it was the impression of 11-1. But you know, you get all these technical terrors to say, oh, well, we don't actually see all 11 going from at the same time. Fair enough if you have to be that technical. But I feel like the impression was all 11 went from at the same time. But if you have to go for it, it's just 4 or 5 at a time, if you will, fair enough. But ultimately, unlike with the comparisons we got heavily in the anime between Beerus and Belmod, or the implied comparisons, in the manga we literally see Belmod go for Beerus with a kick, and Beerus is using his version of Ultra Instinct, an incomplete Ultra Instinct. We don't truly know what level he's at with Ultra Instinct, but it's not a perfected Ultra Instinct or a mastered Ultra Instinct. Beerus is basically oozing. It's like he's rope-a-doping all the gods of destructions with speed alone. But that isn't the only feat he has in his favour. We see him get caught by God of Destruction Moscow, who we see later in this particular fight literally dealing with 2 gods of destructions at once. And that's much more of what I'm talking about, these match-defining moments. Beerus lets himself get caught by Moscow and uses Moscow as bait, or uses Champa as bait, and literally uses power to burst free and allow Moscow and Champa to come under attack, whilst all these gods of destructions are after him. So you could say that's a strength feat by Beerus. It's a cunning plan by Beerus in the midst of battle, and obviously we've seen the speed feats beforehand. Obviously, like I said, all these feats on their own don't necessarily mean anything, but as we see later in the tournament, the match-defining moment here is that Beerus is within the last 2 gods of destructions alongside Quitela. We know he's one of the strongest. We know through many quotes throughout the Dragon Ball Super Manga that Beerus is deemed one of the strongest from Goku Black, who says that he's one of the most dangerous gods of destructions. Quitela's comments, particularly picking on Beerus in terms of who is the stronger god of destruction, then the actual fight itself. They both last till the end. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of feats in between that people will say, well, look, they're all harming each other, they're scratching each other, therefore they're all similar levels of power. But you've got to think of the context of this particular battle. It's a battle royale, it's not one-on-one. We know with Dragon Ball characters, even with extremely powerful characters, if they get caught off guard, they can get hurt or injured. We've seen numerous occasions throughout the history of Dragon Ball of weaker characters wounding stronger characters. This isn't something that has never happened, and this is what I'm saying. We need to go beyond just saying, oh, this guy's hit this guy, therefore it's the same power. We've got to consider the subtext and the context behind it. And you know what, if people don't agree on it, that's when we've got to engage in the dialectic to, get to a conclusion and put all of our thoughts together to, see if it actually holds up against scrutiny. But like I said, this is a battle royale. They cannot have their focus on all 11 opponents at once. Obviously, some may be trying to hide their attacks or do sneak attacks. Just look at the recent superhero movie. Obviously, Cell Max is vastly stronger than all the people he's fighting. Even characters like Krillin, in fact, Gotenks are landing hits. And okay, they're not really doing anything significant in terms of damage. I know Gotenks cracks Cell's head and stuff like that, but ultimately, even though they're weaker, they are still able to damage these characters and have an effect on them, even if it's not match defining or match winning. Imagine when there's 12 of you and they're all fighting from different angles. And not only that, these are gods of destructions. They're most likely masters in terms of their power. Whilst we know Belmod is weaker than Jiren and Beerus is likely vastly stronger than Jiren in the manga, we do know that Toppo says Jiren's only stronger than him in terms of combat power, but Belmod likely has other abilities that go along with it. Obviously, we know gods of destructions can learn Ultra Instincts, even though none of them have mastered it. They have other godly techniques like Hakai. I'm sure there's others. We may not have heard of them yet, but I'm sure there's others. I mean, in this tournament, we even see hacks used. For example, we see Rumshi with his sound hacks, where he actually knocks down all gods of destructions. He doesn't last till the end of this battle royale, so, he isn't implied to be one of the stronger gods of destructions, but he does have an effect on them because it's a Hax attack. The more you know about Hax attacks, they are there for equalizers. That's what Dragon Ball Super's always been about, using the likes of Ultra Instinct as an equalizer to greater power, Ultra Ego as an equalizer to greater power, Magic, all of these kind of abilities. All these gods of destructions have loads of abilities. Sidra, who was implied to be one of the weaker gods of destructions in the anime. In the manga, he has a barrier technique and he's known for his speciality in barriers. And we know barriers can amp your power, even from way back in Dragon Ball Z. So imagine a god of destruction who's a specialist at using this kind of stuff. Obviously, we can talk about when Belmod manages to trap all of the gods of destructions at once within his attack and then attacks them with those razor-like cards. And they do scratch quite a lot of the gods of destructions. None of them seem to be defeated by it, or are they match-defining moments. But we know that the Fox God of Destruction, what's his name? Is it Licker? I think it's Licker. I might be wrong there. But Licker, we'll just go with it. He escapes Belmod's attack and then actually attacks Belmod. Does he particularly hurt Belmod with his Nine Tails attack? We don't know because Belmod doesn't appear to be injured at the end. But he does escape that trapping move, and even then, Licker doesn't last till the end of the God of Destruction tournament. I think he's beaten by Moscow, who we saw Beerus completely overpower and outspeed earlier in the actual exhibition. So take into account all the levels of ability in terms of fighting styles these Gods of Destructions have, the hacks they have, the nature of the battle itself being a battle royale, not a one-on-one fight. Consider what we saw in the Tournament of Power. We even saw Roshi, who's one of the weaker people in the Tournament of Power, last an incredibly long time, longer than other characters that were stronger than him. The nature of the battle is incredibly different to a one-on-one. This is why, let's say we have all 12 Gods of Destruction on a scale of 1 to 100. This is why you can have 3 gods with, say, 93 out of 100 in terms of raw power. Let's say that's Beerus, Quitela and Champa. Then we could have Belmod, Sidra and Helez. They're all, say, 20 out of 100. Now, the gap in their power between the first 3 and the second 3 sounds huge. Then think there's another 6 Gods of Destructions that are going to be scattered somewhere in the middle of those powers. Now, if one of those characters with 93 power decides to attack another at full power or use a great deal of his power, he's leaving himself open to one of the other Gods of Destructions that's at a similar level of power to him, and obviously he can get taken out. Like I said, characters caught off guard in Dragon Ball can get hurt by much weaker characters, never mind characters on a similar level to you. So that's why the levels of power can vary quite a lot, and just because they all basically have moments of interaction with each other in this battle royale, it doesn't mean that they're all at a similar level. We know the Gods of Destructions are mortals that are appointed to that position, and they've been in that position for a certain amount of time. We know from the manga that Gods of Destruction increase their Hakai by thinking of destruction, and they train. So over a long period of time, some Gods of Destructions are going to have much more chance of training than Gods of Destructions who haven't been doing it for as long. Obviously, then you could bring into ability and latent talent. Some doesn't necessarily mean just because you've been a God of Destruction less time, that God of Destruction that's been a God of Destruction longer than you is definitely stronger. Just look at Goku. Goku's implied to be catching a lot of these gods of destructions, even though they've lived a lot longer than him. It's highly unlikely, given that they've all been training for varying times, that they're all going to be at the same level of power. And like I said, obviously Beerus is central to the Dragon Ball Super story. He is the goalpost that Goku and Vegeta are aiming for. Now, we've talked about this many times on the channel. Is he a moving goalpost? Well, as I've said many times, take away that arm wrestle from the Dragon Ball Super anime, and it really is just the anime that does it. That implies that Beerus level has been set, even though it's quite vague and quite questionable, which once again I talked about in that Jiren video. But ultimately, Beerus's level's never really truly been set, and that is what a lot of people seem to not understand. That's why he's not really moving. He's just not a set goalpost. He is the intended goalpost. Beerus is basically the One Piece of Dragon Ball. Luffy, the Straw Hats, if you watched One Piece, you'll know what I'm talking about. They're going after the One Piece, but they're never really getting there. Beerus is the One Piece of Dragon Ball. That's who Goku and Vegeta are aspiring to be like. As we saw in the Granola arc, Vegeta, despite attaining Ultra Ego, he states at the start of that arc he wants that power of Beerus. And then at the end of the arc, once he's not beaten Granola, he's like, sorry Beerus, I didn't manage to attain the level of power of a God of Destruction like you. But then if we go back to that Zen Exhibition match with the Battle Royale, obviously when Goku shows off God Goku against Topo, some of the gods are saying Goku's reached the level of power of God. What if he has reached some of their levels of power? I mean, if Belmod in particular, who would be around blue levels of power, given what we now know about Jiren from Superhero, who say that Belmod is actually the weakest God of Destruction. He might be the 6th or 7th strongest God of Destruction. Let's say Sidra is one of the weaker gods of destructions, as you could say it's even implied. Maybe he is only god level. Maybe that's why Beerus was truly impressed with Goku, because Goku's managed to attain a level of power at God of Destruction level, even though it's a low tier God of Destruction level. Now that's just me theorizing. I'm not saying that's definitely why Beerus was impressed with him, but you know, it could be on the right track. Or maybe it's just the fact that, you know, Goku has learned God Ki, which is the next step into achieving ultra powers or ultra techniques. Like we saw in the Granola arc, we know that Ultra Ego and Ultra Instinct use a different variation of God Ki than the regular type of God Ki. But if you go back to chapter 27 of the Dragon Ball Super Manga, Beerus tells Vegeta, who's just acquired completed Super Saiyan Blue, that he's strong enough to be a candidate for God of Destruction in another universe. We know that that version of Vegeta can fight similarly to Topo, who is a candidate in another universe for God of Destruction. I mean, that should have been the only comparison we needed, really. That's quite definitive as far as I'm concerned in terms of storytelling. What this implies is that there is a lot of variation between the Gods of Destruction's power, and Beerus is extremely strong. Even if you want to go into the whole has Beerus been training theory, do you believe he's improved that much since the Tournament of Power? Why would his power still be similar levels to all the other Gods of Destructions, and why would that not sort of training not apply to all the Gods of Destructions beforehand? So guys, ultimately, in my opinion, the Gods of Destructions are all at very different, varying levels of power. They do all seem to have hacks abilities that can serve as equalizers in some regards. I think that Beerus and Quitela are two of the strongest. And obviously I'm just going to point this out. Obviously the numbers I'm using aren't exact numbers. It's just to give an example of how it could work. It's not necessarily how it does work, but how it could work and why that particular fight itself doesn't necessarily mean they're all relative. Regardless, Beerus and Quitela last till the end anyway. But obviously guys, that's my thoughts on this particular subject, and I feel like it's being vindicated through the current Dragon Ball Super story in the manga. And obviously we've got chapter 91 coming up, and that's going to hopefully reveal some good insight for us, as we're going to be on Beerus's planet with Goku, Vegeta and Broly. Obviously we've got Budokai Tenkaichi 4 coming out. I am so gassed for that game. I'm going to do some content on that game as well. But this is where you've got to let me know your thoughts, guys. This is what I do this for. I want to know your thoughts. I want to open up that dialogue, that dialectic. Let's start debating these topics and seeing if we can come closer to truer, more objective answer. Guys, lots of videos coming up, especially over the next week. So make sure you subscribe with all notifications switched on. Smash that like button, lend me your energy. Until next time, Ad Astra.